Alright, so this is another tutorial video, and today our objectives would be objectives will be grouping sets, cube, rollup, and subquery. So these are our objectives that we are going to be looking at, and we are going to make use of the group table. We're going to be making use of the group table. Alright, so we'll start from the grouping set and all that. Group, what's the name of the table? Group table, isn't it? I think my is not there. This does not exist. I wonder why it's saying that. Alright, let's create another table. I wonder where it went to. Let me check my schemas. Like my table is not here. I wonder why that is. Just showing two tables here. So the other tables, where are they? Oh well. Okay, let us create a table called group table. Surprised it's not there, but I created it. So create table, group table. Now this table will have a few things to work with so that we can try to be fast so that you can finish your time. We're going to have name, character, variant, and score. Okay, let me check here. Maybe for some reason they are inside here. Alright, I think they are all here. So they are all inside my PostgreSQL, even though I thought I was writing them inside my tutorial table. Alright, so we'll create the group table again since we are expected to be working in our tutorial database, not Postgres. So you say create table. Sorry. So you want to insert values into your group table. You say insert into group table. Our name, course, score. Come here, you say values. Then you have James, physics, you have 84. Have Alex, have biology, you have 83. You have David, you have chemistry, you have 86. So now they took the test again, assuming David, chemistry 91. James physics 85 of annex biology 88. Alright, so these are my values that I'm going to be using for the tutorial today. So the tables and their values. Alright, so let's define a grouping set. So what's a grouping set? So now this allows us to combine multiple group by queries or statements into one query. So I will take that again. This allows us to combine multiple group by statements into one query. Alright, so of course you have to supply the aggregate function and all that. So I can come here and say my select. So I only want to select the columns that I'm going to be using to group. I will select name, course, and I would apply my aggregate function, average of score. And you target the table from group table. And you see your group by, you come here, you see your grouping set. Grouping sets. You open up a parenthesis. So now this grouping set would have the number of columns that we want to group our table by. We need to have the number of columns that we want to use to group our table. Alright, so now you open a parenthesis. So the first columns I want, so I said it allows us to perform multiple group by statements. So the first group by I want to use is name. So name and course. So this is the first group by I want to use. The second group by is using only name. The third group by is using only course. And the last group by is using an empty column. Alright, so what happens here is this is going to allow us to group everything inside this table, inside one table, using name and course. So for the first group by, it uses name and course, that is taking values that are common to both columns, James and physics, and then it applies the aggregate function on their values 85, 85. Then it allows us to group by name, of course, which are James alone. It does not use their values. It doesn't use the value of the second column, just only the value of this column, James, and applies an aggregate function on the numerical values. Then it also allows us to group using this column alone, that is taking on the values physics, biology, function, and then it now allows us to use an empty column or a null value. So now what this simply means is that since it's not using any column, it's going to just apply an aggregate function on everything, taking the average of everything together and returning back a single row. So most of the time, this grouping set value is always the first row in our table. It's not the last, even though we write it as the last. It's going to appear first. So you would see an empty row whereby under the column for score, we have a total value taking the average of all these numerical values. So if I run the query, you would see what I'm talking about. So you can see that exactly what I said. So I said the first, now this empty column we talked about allows us to be able to, since we are not using any column, it just applies an aggregate function on all these numerical values and returns back a single result. And then the next one allows us to use both name and course. So it takes what we have, two 2 James physics takes those two values together, applies an aggregate function on their result, takes Alex biology, all the Alex and biology, and applies an aggregate function of average on the results, takes all the David and chemistry, applies an aggregate function, takes all the David, because we have 2 Davids this time around. After it's done with taking the two values, the 2 columns, it now works with this one, only this column. That's why you can see that we have David Alex, and under here we have null, because at this point in time it's not using the values under this column here. It's only using the values under this column, David and Alex. Now for the next group, and you notice that everything is inside one table. Now for the next grouping set, it takes only the course column and applies an aggregate function. So it takes all the chemistry, all the rows that have chemistry, applies the average aggregate function, takes all the rows that have physics, applies the average, and biology applies the average. Now you notice that we have multiple values here, so you can round them off to the nearest decimal, whether 2 decimal places, 3, depending on your preference. So I can come here and write round. So round, and then you can, so I'm going to use 2 decimal places, that's all. Round average. So you want to run this again, you get your results. You're going to truncate the excess value. You can see that it has reduced them to 2 decimal places. So you can even make it more precise. You can increase its precision. So that's all for grouping sets. So now cube. So let's define what cube is before we move on to how we can use a cube. Alright, so a cube is a short form of writing our grouping set. So cube is a short form for us to write our grouping set. So it does the exact same work as the grouping set. Does the exact same work as our grouping set. So all you have to do is just to supply the 2 columns you are trying to use to perform a grouping set, and it's going to do exactly what is here. So if I use my cube, it's going to carry out exactly what we have just seen here. So this is how you write it. So I'll just copy everything from here and I would apply my cube. So you want to label it first of all. So your cube, I want to label this also as well. So your grouping sets. Alright, so cube. So I will paste that down. And you come down here, you see cube, and all you have to do is just to supply your name and your course column. Now, by doing this, we are doing the exact same thing that the grouping set is carrying out. That's all, very straightforward. You run your query and you discover that you have the exact same thing, nothing changed. That's how you use your cube. And the next one we look at now is the rollup. So rollup, so what does it do? So rollup allows us to perform a partial grouping set or a partial cube. It allows us to perform a partial grouping set, a partial cube. So what do I mean? So now the rollup allows us to only group using name course, name, and the empty column here. That is the empty value. So it allows us to group using name course, name, and the empty value. It does not use course. It doesn't use course. So now, in a situation whereby I wrote course first before name, then it's going to use course and it will not use name. So that's how the rollup works. So maybe, for example, I decided to write my name after the rollup. Came here and I did something like this. If I did something like this, it's going to use name and cost. It's going to use cost, and it's going to use the empty value here. So it's not going to use name. So that's what we mean by rollup, performing a partial grouping set. So I will just come down here, and of course, like rollup as well, you will need to supply the two columns you're trying to group it by. So I'll just come here, say rollup. If you roll up together, open the parenthesis, you see your name and the course. Press play. Now if you expand this, I said it allows us to use name course, only name, and the empty column. So you notice that we have that empty column applying an aggregate function on all the numerical values, and then we have it using name and course together. We use name and course together to group the values and apply an aggregate function. Then it only uses this column name. You can see that it does not use course. If you extend the table down, you don't see the part when it uses course to group this table. So that's all about rollup. So in case you don't want to use your grouping set, you can use cube. And in case you don't want to perform a full grouping set, you can use your rollup. Alright, so that now brings us to subqueries. So what are subqueries? So now these are queries that depend on a main query, or rather these are queries that depend on another query. So in other words, they depend on another query in order for them to be executed. So we're going to do implicit explanations to be able to carry this out. So now let's say, for example, I want to be able to get the average of all these values here. That is, apply an aggregate function. Or maybe I'm trying to get a single value from here. As an example, try to get a single value from here, and I'm trying to compare it with another value. So how do I do that? So let me write out my table again. Just select everything from group table. Get the result. Alright, so now I want to be able to write a query that allows me to be able to select, maybe I'm trying to find out students that actually scored above, let's say above 86, an example. So I want to get students that scored above 86. So that would be my subquery. So I can just come here and I can just label it like this, subquery, so that you can understand. Subquery. Now I would select everything, or rather I'll only select that column, and I'll tell you why. I'll select score. I want to get that value, so select score from my table, which is group table. So group table where score is equal to let's say 85. So we know that this would print out the value whereby score is equal to 85, which is this value alone, 85. So now this has allowed me to be able to get that value. So you just come here and run the results, and you will get just that column alone that has 85. So now this is my subquery. So now back to my main query. So I'll just uncomment this. I'll uncomment this out so that you can understand. Now come here and I'll write main query. So I would show you how this subquery is dependent on this main query. So now I'm saying select everything from my group. So before I combine them together, let's get our main query. So now this allows me to select everything from this table. But I'm trying to look for people that scored above 84. And we were told that this our subquery, sorry, above 85 rather. And we were told that this subquery allows us to extract values of people that scored only 85. So this allows us to score to extract values of, or allows us to extract scores that were 85 and not more and not less. So in order for me to extract people from this table that scored around 85 using a subquery, I'm going to use my where condition and compare it with this subquery. So how do I intend to do that? So I would come here and say select everything from group table, and you come here and you say where score is greater than, open the parenthesis, you can close that here, you can come down here and close the parenthesis. So what have I done here? Now this is going to allow me to select everything from this table, but this time around it's going to find people who scored above 85. You can remember that this subquery returns back only 85. So now this is going to allow me to be able to extract values from this table, whereby we're looking for people that scored above that value. Since this subquery returns 85, this automatically means that I'm trying to extract values from this table of people that scored greater than that 85. So I hope it makes sense. You come here, you highlight everything, and you should be able to get the result. So you now get people that scored above 85, because that's what your subquery returned, and now you are finding something greater than that. All right. Okay, so that's basically it. So you can also be able to use some other you can look at some other criteria and see how you can be able to write a subquery. So let us try and do something again. Let's try and do something before we move ahead. So we need to be able to understand how to use subqueries rather. So I want to create another table that will have similar values to one of my columns in this table. So I will just use this column here. So I'll just say create table compare. So I'm creating a table called compare, and I'm going to use it for my subquery. So you say serial number, you say serial, then I just say subject, and character variant, and make it 50 characters as well. Then you want to insert into compare. I'm inserting into object alone. And you say values. I'll just say chemistry and physics. Alright, so now this will give me the result for my table. Alright, so we want to now carry out something also again, another subquery. So I'll just come here and I'll say subquery. So I want to select just this column alone of people that offered chemistry and physics. So I'll just come here and say select subject from compare. Of course, we know that this will give me only the people that offered chemistry and physics, because those were the only two columns I inserted. So now my main query now we can write the main query again. Select asterisk from group table, I suppose. So from group table. So this one is going to be called main query. Alright, so run it, you see your main query there. This is the main query. Alright, so now we want to look for people that offered only physics and chemistry, because that's what this my query is returning. It's returning only physics and chemistry. If you run that again, you can see that. So I want to be able to return values of people that offered only physics and chemistry using my main query and subquery. And you just come here and say where. So I will run that again so that I'll see the column that we want to use. So where course in. If you can remember from our in statement when we started our earlier tutorials, so in allows us to be able to extract values, to be able to use a list of values or a tuple of values to be able to extract data from a table. So we're using a list of values to extract data from a table. So if values in that list exist in the column of that table, we extract values from that table. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we want to do. So now this should only extract rows from this table of people that offered physics, chemistry, or people who offered physics and chemistry. So you run your query and you can see you have that physics, chemistry, physics. So there are a whole lot of things you can do. You can just manipulate your code to be able to give you the desired result you want. And of course, there is a place of exist which I would need to be able to address properly. So we want to look at the exist statement. I want to look at the exist statement. So now this allows us the exist statement to exist. So now this statement allows us to be able to check if values in a particular row in a table exist inside the row of another table. So in other words, it allows us to use data or a query in a subquery to confirm if values in that subquery also exist in the main query, or whereby we use the number 1 to represent any column from the subquery. So we're going to use number 1 to represent any column of the subquery, and that 1 simply means true. So if values in that table exist inside my main table, it's going to return back true, and it's going to return back those values. That is exactly how it works. Alright, so we're going to do that here. So we want to rewrite this our query again. So you just say select everything from group table where course exists, you open up a parenthesis. Then now for my subquery, you come here, you see select 1 from compare, and you now write your query, your where exists statement. You now come here and say where. So in my compare table, I have subject, and in my group table, I have course. You can just come here and say where course is equal to subject. Yeah, so it's very straightforward like that. So we're trying to check if values in subject are also inside course of my main table. So if they are there, I'm going to print out those values from my main table. That's just how it works. Print out all those values. Alright. I think I made a mistake here. So you just say where exists, not where course exists. So where exists, so it's trying to look for values that exist in my table as well. So you can see that it returns back all those rows. It's just similar to this earlier query that we wrote, but the only difference is that we're using one to represent the validity that those values inside subject exist inside course. So if they exist, if the values inside here exist here, it means that it's going to return true because it's a Boolean condition, true or false. So it exists, then it's going to return back those values that were found inside this column here. So with that being said, that brings us to the end of this tutorial part. So till our next video, have a very good day.